we were discussing the Haktorah of the Kometz and the Levona. And now we're on the threshold, as I mentioned yesterday, of a brand new topic within Menachos, and that's Psulei HaMenachos. And we said that there were 17 Psulei HaMenachos. And I was tempted yesterday to read the list out loud. I think we'll leave that out. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to go through each one on the list individually. The first one is called Anoshim Psulim. And we're talking about Psulei Avoda. Who is disqualified from the Avoda? So, for example, anyone who's disqualified for Avodas HaKarbonos in general is also possible for Avodas HaMincha, for the Kmitza and all the four, parts of the Avoda from Kmitza up to Haktorah. So let's just quickly mention a list of those who are Pasuli Avoda. Number one, a Zar, a non-Kohen is Pasuli Avoda. Number two, an Onen. And just again to review what we know about an Onen, this is a person who lost one of his close relatives, and it's before the burial. So it's called Yom Misa, and it's the first of the 7 days of since the Ptira of one of his 7 Krovim. And this includes also the night that follows the Yom Misa, if it is a time for Krova. So we have the day of Kvura, the day of Misa, and Rabbi Yehuda holds this is all Doraisa. Rabbi Shimon, on the other hand, he holds that Aninus Laila is not Doraisa, it's only Drabanan. In any event, we move on to Tvul Yom. Tvul Yom is a Kohen who became Tomei, and he was already Tovel, but he didn't have Harif Shemesh yet. And then we have Mechusa Kippurim. So that's Zav, Yoledes. So let's say he had a Kohen who is a Zav, and he counted his Zayin Nikir. He went to the mikveh. He's missing his kapara. He has to bring, if he's a Zav or a Mitzor, he has to bring an entire series of karbanos, which he'll bring the next day, and he hasn't yet brought his karbanos. So he's enjoying from Avod. Then we have Mechusa Begadim, which would mean that he's missing one of his 4 Begadim. In the case of a Kohen Hedjot, that's Michnasayim, Ksones, Avnei, Mikbas. In the case of Kohen Gadol, he has an additional 4 Begadim called Me'il, Choshen, Ephod, Vitzitz, and he's missing one of his 8 Begadim. Then we have a person who is missing Kiddush, Yadayim, Vraglayim. Then we have an Orel, a Tomei. Now, with regard to these psulim, we also have additional psulim that are not mentioned in the Mishnah. And those are, number one, Shisui Yayin, a Kohen who drank a certain minimum volume of wine. Parua Rosh. Okay, this is a separate lav and an Easter in the Torah to do Avoda Parua Rosh, when his hair is Parua, flying in all directions. Then we have a Balmud. We have someone who is Oved Avodah Zarah. Now, let's say he violated Avodah Zarah b'shogeg. He was unaware of the Easter. And then he did tshuva. He still is possible. Lo yishamesh b'migdash li'olam, the Rambam in Perek Tes Mihilchos bias migdash. And this, my friends, touches on a very sensitive contemporary issue, which I don't want to mention here, about a chayal who killed in war, whether or not he can duchen in today's day. Anyway, miyusar begadim. Let's say he has more than the 4 begadim of the Kohen Hedron, or more than the 8 begadim of the Kohen Gadol. And here we have machlokes where he put that extra beged. Did he put it in a makom begadim or somewhere else on his body? Then we have karua begadim. His begadim are ripped, because if he ripped his begadim like a kriyal mess, then the bigdei kahunim are considered mikuraim, and they're apostle. So lemaisa, it's as if he's not wearing begadim. So that's the first category of anoshim psulim lavoda that has all told 14 subcategories. Now we go on to category number 2, and that's called small. He used his left hand instead of his right hand. Now, according to the Chachamim, we'll soon see Rab Shimon, any avoda in the mincha, if it wasn't implemented biyad yamin, but rather biyad small, the avoda is psula. It is disqualified, and the mincha will have to be replaced by another mincha. And this is derived from the Parsha Mitzorah, of all places. With regard to the Lug Shemin of Mitzorah, if you open up to Vayikra Perek Yudalid, the Torah says, "V'kavala kohen es etzba'o hayiminis min hashemen." And the Chachamim learned from this that etzba kahuna means yamin, because in the pasuk it says etzba, it says kohen, and it says yaminis, requiring yad yaminis. So therefore, any avoda in mincha with the left hand is psula. How's along Rab Shimon? And he says only kmitza will require yamin. Olacha haktara shera b'small. And if you recall, we said that according to Rab Shimon, we don't derive from Mitzorah unless the Torah says etzba. But when the Torah says kahuna without etzba, you don't require yamin. And that's the famous shita of Rabbi Shimon regarding dam chatos, that matan dam chatos, it says v'lakacha kohen midam chatos be'etzba'o. And therefore it needs yamin. And the avodas hamincha, which are done biyad, that requires yamin, because in the parsha of chatos it says, parsha mincha, it says ke chatos u ke asham. So if he's doing the avoda with his yad, which is Rab Shimon's unique shita, then it's got to be done biyamin. Now, exactly what Rab Shimon holds is a matter of debate, as we've seen in the past. According to Rab Yehuda Bereder of Chia, Rab Shimon holds that you don't have to put the komets in a kli. You can do holacha and aktara biyad on the mizbeach. And if you're doing the holacha or the aktara biyad, then you need yad yamin. But if he has the halacha or the aktara in a kli, then his avodah is kshera even this small. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Who disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda? That's Rabbi Yanai. He says, "Afilu lo nosan es hakometz b'kli sharetz. Ein tzarich sheyavod biyodo klal. Elafilu im nisonam behemono o b'kli cheres v'ktiru kosher." he doesn't have to put the komets into a kli sharis. And he can take the komets in a regular kli. It could be a belt, it could be pottery, which is not called a kli. And he could bring it to the mizbeach. So he's got the komets in something called a kli cheres or heimino. And in such a case, according to Rav Shimon, he can fulfill the mitzvah of komets. Again, let's just summarize. We have b'nei adam hapsulim lavoda. We have small. And now we get to the third category. That's called yeshiva. Ein avodos hamincha ksheros ela ba'amida, says the Mishnah. And this is derived from a pasuk in Dvarim Perek Yud Ches, ki bo bachar Hashem Elokecha mikol shvatecha la'amod l'sharis. And la'amod is a precondition for sheris. Sheris means avoda. And therefore, if he does the avoda in a sitting position, his avoda is psula. Now, I don't know enough about a balmum, but I'm just wondering if you could have a case of a Kohen who has to sit. He cannot stand, but he's not a balmum. I doubt if you had such a category, but let's say you did. I'm wondering if his avodah would be kshera, even though it's be yeshiva, because the entire requirement of amida is a matter of kavod. The Torah says, it's insulting to serve the master of the universe in a sitting position, but I don't know if that applies to someone who never doesn't have the option of standing. Again, if he's not a balmum. Okay. Now we get to shoes as opposed to barefoot. And that's called chatzitza. When the Kohen is doing the avoda, he's got to stand on the ritzvah of the azor without any hefsek whatsoever. No chatzitza between his feet and the ritzvah. That's why there were special lishkos where the Kohen would warm up their bodies because they got very cold. But if he does the avodah and he's standing on top of something or he's wearing shoes, then avodaso psula. And the Mishnah Daf Vav includes a case where he's standing on the feet of his other colleagues, his other Kohen. It doesn't matter. He needs that his feet have direct contact with the Ritzvas Hazor. Now, what happens if he does a kind of juggling act? He's got regal achas al ritzvah, for regal shnia al gabe kli. So he's got one foot on a kli, the other foot is directly on the ground of the azor, or it's on a stone. He puts one foot on a stone. So this is a sugya in Masechtas Zvachim Chav Daled. Im yachol lahamshich lamod kishenitlu akli or even, then he's kosher. His avodah is kosher. Pull away the even from his second leg. Can he still stand on one leg that's connected to the ground of the azora? If he can do so, then his avodah is kosher. And now we get to the following question. What happens if the azora, which is made of stone, the floor of the azora, one of the stones gets loose? Now, if it gets loose, it's no longer attached to the other stones of the azora. And the intention is that stone be not replaced, that would be a bad word, but reset, so to speak, meaning we're going to attach that loose stone, like Chas v'Shalom, you have a loose tooth. So sometimes they have to pull the tooth and put in a cap or something like that, but sometimes they intend to re-cement your natural tooth. Is he allowed to stand for the sake of the avoda on top of this Evan, which is part of the Ritzvah Azora, but it's nisdaldala, it's loose. That's one suffix in the Gemara. Now we have the second suffix. Evan shenekra, it's completely uprooted, it's completely detached, but the Amad bin Kom, although it's not attached to the other stones of the Azora, but nevertheless it is in its place in the Azora. And he's standing on that Evan Shenekra, the Amad bin Kom. Is his avodah kshera because it's all part of the Karka Azora, or it's psula? Why? Because this is not called derech sherus. This is not the normal way that you stand in front of your master and try to do his bid. And now we're up to page Yud Dalet. Tzorech HaKohen lechos biyodo es hakometz b'shas hakmitza. There's got to be direct contact between the hand of the Kohen and the kometz. Im hayadavar chotzeis beino levein hakometz avodas psula. V'chein im hayadavar chotzeis bein yado levein hakli she'oved bo avodas psula. So there cannot be a chatzitza between his hand and the kometz, between his hand and the klisharis that he's working with. However, here we have a shita, not clear to me. Oh, he says it's Rashi. Okay, fine. She'im haya v'toch hakometz davar hachotzes v'cholek oso l'shnei chatzoim hakometz posel. If, let's say, in the kli, he's got a kometz, but he has something wedging, separating the kometz into two chatzon. And we said that you cannot be makriv a chatzi mincha. So this is psu. Category number 5. Mincha shenechsera. If the mincha is missing part of it, for example, the shirayim beyond the kometz got lost. Oshen nitmu li'achar kmitza, or the shirayim were contaminated with a sheret that fell on it after the kmitza. According to Rabbi Eliezer, no problem. Maktirin es komtza. Go ahead and be mocked in the kometz, even though there'll be no shirayim, because the shirayim are lost or they became tameh. Rabbi Yeshua says, "Ein maktirin komtza." In order to be maktir the kometz, you have to have shirayim. And if there are no shirayim, then you're not maktir the Torah, the kometz. Mincha shenechsar michzas mishirel. So until now, we said that the shirayim were gone, and there's a machlokes. Can you be maktir the kometz if there are no shirayim? What happens if part of the shirayim are gone? According to Rabbi Yeshua, ein maktirin es komtza in the case of nevda hashirayim. But now we're talking about nechsara michzas shirayim. What would Rabbi Yeshua say? Reish Lakish says in Menachos Taftes, Ein maktiris komta. According to Rabbi Yeshua, says Reish Lakish, it's an all or nothing proposition. You cannot be maktir the komets unless you have the entire balance of shirayim to be maktir. If part of the shirayim are gone, then you cannot be maktir the komets. And Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. Maktirin es komta. As long as part of the komets is still available, as long as there will be a kiyum of achilas hakoin in miktzas hakorban, miktzas hashirayim, then maktirin es komta. Why? Because now the komets is going to be matir part of the shirayim. If the entire shirayim became possible or lost, then there's no haktaras hakomets. V'rak hashirayim nifsolim me'achila. And in the note here, he says, Shekei Nemar, the Torah says, Vanosra min amincha li Aaron ulabanav. And the Gemara says, Hanosra min amincha necheles l'kohen v'lo anoseres min anoseres. Klomar shirayim shleimin shem nosar mimincha liachar shenikmitza v'lo shirayim shechasu lehem nosar shel nosar amincha. And now Rashi says that this is only according to one shita, that's the shita of Zeira. But according to Rabbi Yanai, the Shirayim are ksherim. Now in Mincha, Shenechzer Kodem Kmitza, there we have a Machlokes Hamoraim. According to Rabbi Yochanan, he's got to bring another soles from his house to be mashlim, to replace that which got lost, that which is chisara. Because ein shem mikva mincha nikva b'nesinasa lekli el rak b'kmitzasa. And therefore, since part of the soles was gone before the kmitza, we've got to replace it. Reish Lakish says he psula. Ein lo takana. Because matna kli is kovea the shema, and from that moment, it cannot be mitzuref to the soles and the balance of the soles. Okay, then let's make a note of where we got up to here. We're on page Yudalid, and we're up to number Vav.